Thanks for listening to the ArtTactic Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Green. Hope everyone had a relaxing holiday season and the start to your 2024 is going well. As the new year ramps up, it feels like many are closely monitoring the early happenings of the year to see just exactly how the art market is doing. One of the big first tests of the year is in Singapore, where the art fair ArtSG will host its second edition of the fair from January 19th through the 21st, with a VIP preview on January 18th. Singapore has garnered a significant amount of attention the last few years as it started to develop as a growing art hub in Asia. So in this week's episode of the podcast, we chat with Magnus Renfrew, co-founder of ArtSG, about Singapore as an art hub, as well as their upcoming fair. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Thanks so much for listening. Magnus, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Adam.
Absolutely. Thanks again for joining us. So for our listeners who maybe haven't been following Singapore that closely, tell us about the recent surge in interest in Singapore from the art world, and really why is it occurring?
I think part of the reason for the recent resurgence in interest in Singapore has been the launch of ArtSG, which took place, that the first edition took place in January last year. But I think that it's really reflecting a wider dynamic at the moment, which is that people are recognizing the importance of Southeast Asia, both as a center of cultural production, not just Singapore itself, but really using Singapore as a gateway to discover the rich and diverse areas of cultural production throughout Southeast Asia. But also because of the economic factors and geoeconomic and geopolitical factors that really are asserting Singapore's ever greater relevance. Singapore is centrally located within Southeast Asia and has always historically been the natural hub for the region. And it's really this aspect of things that I think is very important for its relevance within the art world. Historically, the market within Singapore hasn't been big enough to sustain an art fair of this scale and ambition in its own right, and it's really Singapore's long established position as a hub for the region that it is really the driver for creating an art fair there. So it's really dependent on us getting all of the different constituencies from around the region to come to create that critical mass of audience, if you like, that can make a fair like this make sense. But Southeast Asia is home to around 650 million people. And so it's approximately the same population size as Europe. So if one it's home to many of the fastest growing economies in the world. So in that sense, it really makes sense that there's one major international art fair that can really cater to those diverse audiences.
Yeah, and it does feel like the last several years, there really has been a lot of interest from galleries and other market participants in the West, in Asia, in different hubs within Asia. How would you compare the art market in Singapore with, for example, other flourishing markets in Asia?
I think that a lot of the other markets in Asia are quite domestically focused. And so I think that, within Korea or Taiwan or Japan, that really primarily the driver of those fairs is the domestic audience. With Singapore, it's really about, as I was saying, getting a much broader constituency to attend from much wider area. I think that for Southeast Asia, it's perhaps in terms of the market, it's a slightly earlier stage of development than some of the other markets in Asia. But I think that there's a huge opportunity there for people to come in and be part of the process. And that's one of the things that we have been working very hard with our galleries, that the exhibitors actually really feel part of the process to be building the market with us in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, I wanted to chat with you about the exhibitors at ArtSG. specifically those that aren't from the region, what is generally their strategy for a foreign fair like this? Is it more about introducing their program to new collectors or checking in with existing collectors or both? Or what's do you think is overall their general perspective on how they approach this kind of fair?
Well, I think it's all of the above, really. I think that galleries are looking to connect with their existing clients and to be able to, art fairs are really now a touch point on the calendar that allow people to have an excuse to get in touch with their existing clients and so on. But also, it's very important that I think that people are looking to try and expand their audiences and expand into new markets to meet new collectors and meet new prospective buyers that can really be the pipeline of the future. Galleries have been taking sort of different approaches and things. We've wanted the galleries, as I say, to be a part of the process of building things. So we've been conducting road shows around Southeast Asia to engage with collectors and potential collectors. And we actually invited galleries to be a part of that. A number of galleries did join us in events in Bangkok, in Jakarta, in Manila, and so on. So we really very much see it as a partnership. In terms of the sort of the approach of what galleries will bring, I think that we've been encouraging galleries to really be quite focused in terms of their curatorial presentation, to bring a number of works by the same artist, for example, so that people can really develop their own sense of context. I think as with any sort of nascent market, I think that work that is sort of heavy duty conceptual without any visual payback can sometimes struggle a little bit. So I think it's very important to ensure that there is visually appealing work and things that can resonate with people who are at an earlier stage of their collecting process. But it's also a two-way street because we're also trying to help put on a pedestal great work from Southeast Asia and the great artists of Southeast Asia, and to help people to see the strength of the cultural production really from Indonesia, from Thailand, from the Philippines, and so on.
And so as we begin the new year, ArtSG is one of the first fairs of the calendar year. I know a lot of people will be monitoring to see how it does, to try to get a glimpse as to how the year may unfold for the overall art market. From your conversations with exhibitors, how are they feeling about the art market headed into the fair?
I think that obviously 2023 was a testing year in many ways for people. So I think that people are hoping for a brighter 2024. We have been sort of receiving good indications from collectors of their attendance at the fair. So we're feeling quite bullish in that respect, and galleries have been expressing to us that they have people that they are hearing are coming, which is very encouraging. So I think that there's a sense of optimism, cautious optimism about how things will pan out. But I think it's also important that galleries really see this as a longer term play, that they really see the huge opportunity there is for Singapore and for developing the art market in Southeast Asia. And they also see the dynamics of the wider dynamics and increasing relevance of Singapore, not just in the art world, but actually in all aspects of things. I think that over the last sort of 5 years or so, the terminology has even been changing in Asia. You hear less about Asia Pacific now and more about Indo-Pacific. And whereas Singapore couldn't really lay claim to be the capital of the Asia Pacific, it's absolutely the de facto hub of the Indo-Pacific. And whilst I mentioned previously that really the initial case for Singapore was really about its position as a hub for a wider audience, it's also the case for Singapore itself has strengthened recently. There's been a lot of people who've been moving to Singapore. There's been a lot of wealth that's been moving to Singapore. And one of the indicators of that is the number of family offices has increased from around 70 in 2016 to over 700 today. And for a family office structure to make sense and to be viable, you really need to have a minimum viable assets under management of about 100 million US dollars. And many of them are many times that. So there's a real increase in activity in terms of money flowing into Singapore from right around Asia and from right around the world. It's always been the private wealth capital of Asia, but that has been dramatically increasing over the last few years. And I think that sort of sets the groundwork and lays foundations for a very strong art market and a developing art market over the coming years.
And so you've managed multiple art fairs over the course of your career. From your experiences, what are some of the specific goals of a fair organizer in a second year of a fair, which ArtSG is, in order to achieve a long-term successful fair?
I think it's really building on the foundations of the first year. I think in the first year, although it's always challenging to get things off the ground, that you are shiny, new, and exciting. And I think in the second year, you really have to step things up a level. And we feel that we have one of the sort of gratifying things this year has been the level of support that we're getting from the art community in Singapore and from the city itself, that really everybody's putting their best foot forward that week. The fair coincides with Singapore Art Week, which is now in its 11th year. But I think that the quality of offerings this year has really taken a step up. There's great exhibitions on at the National Gallery of Singapore. They have a show called Tropical, which is stories from Southeast Asia and Latin America, looking at similarities of modernism from the tropics. You've got an exhibition by Ho Tsun Yen at the Singapore Art Museum, who's one of Singapore's most celebrated contemporary artists. And then there are some great private initiatives that have been launched this year. There's a private foundation called the Institutum that is putting on a major exhibition called Translations Afro-Asian Poetics, which is being curated by Zoe Whitley from the Chisenhale Gallery. And that's going to be at a number of different venues across the Gilman Barracks. So it's really going to be a very dynamic and packed week of events, really to allow people to discover the best that Singapore has to offer, and also to meet people from right around the region.
Perfect. Well, Magnus, thanks so much again for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate hearing your unique perspective on Singapore, as well as helping us preview the second edition of ArtSG. In case our listeners want to learn more information about the fair, what's the website they can visit? And also, if you have anything else to plug regarding the upcoming edition of the fair, please go ahead and do so.
Yep. So the website is www.artsg.com. And, I think that we've got over 110 galleries participating from 33 different countries and territories. We've got some great major Western galleries participating, like White Cube and Gagosian, Thaddeus Ropac, Xavier Hufkins, Gisela Capitaine, and so on. We've got some fantastic galleries from Asia, like Cook J. In fact, 30% of our galleries this year are from Southeast Asia, which we're very proud of, to have a really solid representation of galleries from the region. We've got a fantastic talks program and also a film program that's being curated by the curator Sam Ishan, who was formerly with the National Gallery of Singapore, and that takes place at the Art Science Museum. So it's going to be a packed week of events, and we'd love for everybody to come and join us and descend on Singapore and see this really great step forward, our second step on a longer journey to really help to drive Singapore to become a major international art hub, which we're confident that we can do over the coming years.
Perfect. Best of luck with the fair later this month. Thanks, Magnus.
Thanks very much, Evan.